As one of 3 areas that connects you to your bike, cycling shoes are hugely important when it comes to both comfort and your performance when cycling. But do you get a different experience if you're using an entry-level pair compared to a top-end pair? Well, ultimately, that's going to come down to exactly what you want to get out of your riding and what your riding style is. To help explain this, we've partnered with Specialized, which are a market leader when it comes to cycling shoes for a couple of very good reasons. For starters, this is because of its body geometry design principles, which are informed by thousands of bike fit datasets and have allowed the brand to solve problems that cyclists feel every single day, from amateurs right through to World Tour professionals. Secondly, Specialized has shoes at every price point that I want to talk about today. It starts with these. The Specialized Torch 1.0. These cost just under £100. Now, of course, you can get cycling shoes for less money than that, but this price point is what a lot of people would consider entry level for reasons I'll come on to later in this video. Next up are our mid-range pair of shoes. These are the Torch 3.0s that cost £230, whilst finally at the top end are these, the Specialized S-Works Aries shoe, which costs £375 and represents the pinnacle of cycling shoe technology. But that doesn't mean that all of the information here applies only to Specialized shoes. The principles of what I'm going to tell you can be applied to any set of footwear on the market. The sole is absolutely one of the key parts of cycling footwear, and it really shapes the purpose of the shoe because it can be tuned depending on what the rider wants, whether that's greater amounts of comfort or a performance-orientated stiffness. Take the Torch 1.0 for example. At just under £100, it features a nylon composite sole. Now, nylon composite soles are a classic feature of this price point because they offer the perfect blend of performance, comfort, and great bang for your buck. By that, I mean they're stiff enough that they don't feel all flexy like maybe the sole of your trainers do if you're cycling in them at the moment, but also they're not too hard or too stiff that they send your feet to sleep when you're cycling along. Of course, it's never going to be as stiff as the soles found on the Torch 3.0s or the S-Works Aries shoes, but at £230 and £375 respectively, those shoes are really being tailored for a specific rider in mind, probably somebody that's racing or really looking to get some performance out of their footwear. Now, the sole shape generally will change as you spend more money. So for example, let's compare the 1.0s to the Torch 3.0s, and you can already see that that sole has become both raised up and is much thinner. Compare that still to our top-end pair of shoes, and you'll see that the sole looks completely different again, featuring these cutaways as well as a different profile almost entirely. With Specialized shoes, the soles are informed by something called pressure mapping. This is where they've mapped the pressure coming from the majority of the riders through the sole of the shoe. This has allowed them to cut away parts of the sole which aren't featuring pressure from the rider, whilst leaving the sole built up in the areas that are. This allows the shoe to maintain that support while shedding weight. Talking of weight, I'll pop these on the scale now so you can get the difference in price points. The Torch 1.0s weigh 284 grams a shoe. The Torch 3.0s weigh 267 grams a shoe, whilst the S-Works Aries are 253 grams a shoe. You'll also see that the cleat affixing point, where the cleat sits on the shoe, is different on the entry-level pair compared to the top-end pair. The top-end pair are much more likely to have a plate in there to allow the rider to minutely change the positioning and the angle of the cleats. Again, you might not even get that on a mid-range pair, and you don't on these Torch 3.0s. Again, this is done with performance in mind, and those performance-orientated riders are much more likely to want to finesse the position of their cleat, compared to entry-level riders where this might not be such a priority. If I'm being completely honest, I can't even remember the last time I adjusted my cleat position, let alone finessed it to the minutest degree. Look at these 3 different shoes and you'll notice that they all have quite different uppers. Now, by an upper, we mean basically anything that connects to the sole of the shoe and is used to wrap around your feet. One of the bigger changes as you spend more money is that the breathability of your shoe will increase. Take an entry-level pair of shoes as an example. They're going to be comfortable, but they're likely to be bigger than a higher-end pair of shoes, which will be a bit more shapely, shall we say. At the entry level, you're likely to have a more built-up and robust shoe with additional padding around the heel area and down the sides. What's immediately different as you move up the price points is how much more slimmed down that shoe becomes. It's much more sculpted at the front end and it will sit much closer to your feet. If you take this Torch 3.0 as an example, you can already see the bigger vents down the sides, and if you can touch it and feel it, maybe if you go to a bike shop, you'll notice that it's that bit thinner. That's not to say that top-end shoes aren't padded or comfortable at all, they just tend to have a much greater focus on where that padding is applied. It's built up in the heel cup area, but removed elsewhere. This is because that's where you're likely to feel rubbing, and also when you're doing a performance effort or a sprint, that will help lock your foot in place to stop the shoe from moving around. Top-end shoes are also where brands are likely to introduce its latest technology. On these Aries shoes, for example, that's this sock-like cuff that replaces a traditional tongue. That's both more comfortable, reducing any chance of rubbing coming from a normal tongue, but also helps reduce weight. You're also much less likely to see seams on the shoe in general. That's not just for comfort, but also a symbol of the sophistication of the upper material. Usually, a shoe will close in 3 different ways. It will use Velcro, laces, or dials. Now, Velcro is common on entry-level shoes, whilst laces tend to be a hallmark of the mid-tier price point and above, and are used by brands to add a bit of style as well as comfort to a cycling shoe. Meanwhile, dials used to only be seen on top-end tech. However, Specialized and many brands are now using dials on their entry-level footwear and pairing it with a Velcro strap. The difference then, as you spend more money, is not getting a dial, but actually how many you get and what they can do. On an entry-level shoe, for example, you're likely to get just the one at the top here, and it tends to have fairly limited action. For example, this can tighten quite minutely, but it's unable to reverse that. And to loosen the shoe, you're going to have to pop the spool entirely and then loosen it as a whole like that. Meanwhile, at the midpoint price, you're likely to get 2 dials. Now, typically, the top dial is one we use to tighten the shoe and to add tension, whilst the bottom dial is the one that we use to finesse the fit and to add comfort. These dials are also likely to be more sophisticated. For example, on this shoe, it can tighten minutely, but also loosen as well by reversing the action, which just means you don't have to fiddle around with your foot so much when you're riding along. Finally, at the top end, you're going to get the best of the best, whether that's a brand's own dials or the Boa Dials that Specialized uses here. Now, these Boa Li2 dials are capable of a very minute amount of adjustment to tighten, loosen in the same way, but you can also pop them entirely to loosen the spool so you can take the shoe off really quickly. Top-end shoes are also much more likely to have a technical closure solution. For example, this Aries shoe doesn't just tighten across the top like the other shoes do, but actually it wraps all the way around from the back and clamps the foot down into the shoe and onto the pedal, perfect for those high-performance moments in a race, for example. So there you go, that's exactly what changes on a cycling shoe as you spend more money, detailed and demoed. Cycling shoes are designed with a type of rider in mind, and as the price goes up, they tend to have a greater focus on performance. How that will impact your riding is what you want to consider when buying your next pair of shoes, whether that's your first pair or whether you're upgrading your old set. Now, if you have any additional questions about cycling shoes, do pop them in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. If you have liked this video and found it useful, give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the Cycling Weekly YouTube channel for more great tech content.